So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the psychology of writing a publishable paper, and from the beginning until the end of the process. So the first step, of course, is in creating the paper, and often your first publications will be based on your dissertation or the research that you've done in your courses. And as I've said other places, a lot of times, even when you first get a job, you may be very busy teaching classes or preparing, and so your research, and you may be under a lot of pressure to publish then, but the research, you can't do new research, so you may be looking at turning your dissertation into publication. So again, how well you do this process, a lot's going to depend on how you organize your dissertation so that you can make it into publishable papers. So you may want to start by choosing a problem that you want to work on. Sometimes you've already chosen a problem, or your advisor may have chosen the problem that you want to work on. But basically, you want to look on something that you think is going to be publishable. How do you know it's publishable? Well, read the journal, choose a journal, and read it to make sure that journal is appropriate for your paper. Journals may favor one kind of research over another, or they may not like certain kinds of research, and so you have to know that. And sometimes this is explicitly stated in the guidelines, but often it's not, and you have to figure out what are topics that the journal may be interested in. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes a journal may look like they're not interested in a particular topic, but they realize, oh, we've never published on this topic, hopefully we can get some papers on this topic, or they may have a special interest, a special issue on a particular topic. So it's not always a precise process, but the best sense you can get at what is still important in the journal and what you can't publish. And of course, whenever you're writing a paper, you need to borrow text from other sources. Again, that's one of the most important aspects of academic writing, is that you need to show what text you're using. First of all, it's less important that you come up with an idea on your own, that you show how your research relates to other research. And also, it's a way of demonstrating your familiarity with the research. Again, people don't know who you are. The reviews are often blindly read. And so they want to know, are you a reputable scholar? And one way of knowing it is, have you read all the right sources? And sometimes it's simply a matter of acknowledging that you've read them. That's why you see expressions in papers like recent research has shown. Well, that means there's a lot of research. So it's always more important to show how your research is connected to other people's research. I don't sometimes like, and that's a personal bias, when they say, well, there's no research on this topic. Maybe there's no research on a topic because it's not interesting. So you're always kind of aware of how your research builds on other research, the old expression, standing on the shoulder of giants. More specifically, again, you do have to show your acknowledgement of other sources in the formal way that's stated in the guidelines. We call violations of this plagiarism. Sometimes plagiarism is more complicated than that, and we'll talk a little bit about that and elsewhere. Arguments are based on the fact that more people have done research. So essentially, the more research on an argument, the stronger your argument is. It is possible that no one's addressed this topic, but then your conclusions are not going to be very strong. So it's always better if people have built on the argument, and either you're showing that maybe they're wrong if you disagree with them, but most of the time you cite references to show that they agree with you. So most of the references in your paper will be articles that agree with what you're saying. And by doing this, you're creating this network, this invisible college, in which you connect yourself to all the research, including your own, that's gone before you. And by doing that, you show you're part of the community. It's not like you're an individual. You're not writing a novel. It's not an original. document an academic paper is built on the research of others. And it provides a kind of access to people. I mean, one of the reasons you cite research is to show other people what's available on the topic. So they may want to check what you said, or they may want to look in more depth at a particular issue. And so for those reasons, you're citing these sources. And so plagiarism is one reason to do this, but it's not the only reason. There are many reasons to cite sources. So if you're ever in doubt, just cite as much as you can. So when you're at home doing your writing, remember, writing a paper, an academic paper, is not a linear process, that you don't necessarily begin at the beginning. Maybe you've already done the research, or maybe you have your methods. So maybe you write the methods first, and then the results first, and then the introduction and literature review. The most important thing is, no matter in what order you write it, they're connected to each other. So the literature review and the results are clearly connected. You don't need to report everything that's ever been written. You need to report everything that justifies the methodology and the results and the discussion that you're going to make. And so you don't need to do that in any particular order. And so at the end of the paper, sometimes it's now more at the beginning, but you're trying to show how your paper is important. What is the contribution your paper made? So the first sentence of the paper is normally about why the topic of your paper is important, and then the conclusion and discussion is about why your research is important and what does it add to the established body of research. And in the old days, and meaning back in the 16th, 17th century, writers didn't do that, even in the 18th, 19th century. Nowadays, it's become more important to demonstrate why your research is important. And often that's put in the introduction of the paper, and writers don't necessarily even wait to the end. So as we've discussed elsewhere, it's important that your content matches the appropriateness of the journal. And so you need to look at what kinds of articles they publish. And as I said elsewhere, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't send it to a journal that may not have published things. They may want to be interested in things, they just may not have gotten the article. Sometimes that's very difficult. But generally speaking, look for a journal that publishes research similar, at least similar in content and similar in form to what you've already published. And then when you go to organize your paper, you'll need to look at the journal organization. How do published authors organize that paper? Do they use numbering or headings, things like that? You'll learn from what is in the journal.